If you're looking for a family-friendly three-row EV, but the Rivian R1S, the Tesla Model X, and the Volvo EX90 are a bit too expensive, well, you might want to take a look at the new Hyundai Ioniq 9. This is the close relative to the Kia EV9, but there are a solid number of reasons why you should choose this over that related Kia, especially if you have the ability to wait until early 2025 for your purchase, because we get more range, I think we get a more attractive exterior, and we get a little bit more tech on the inside as well. We don't know official pricing yet, but you can bet this is probably going to start around the $60,000 range, so significantly less than the Rivian, the Volvo, or of course the Tesla. I'm just going to go ahead and grab the camera so we can take a look around the EV9, and as we do, you should know this is not a fully loaded model, so fortunately I was able to get my hands on one of the more mainstream trims. There's clearly a family resemblance between the Ioniq 9, the Ioniq 5, and of course the Ioniq 6. But Hyundai said they wanted to give each of these vehicles their own unique personality, so even though there are some coordinating elements, we have a design that is definitely distinctively Ioniq 9. We see the latest interpretation of their pixel design language, so all these individual squares in the DRL running right across the front, and then of course that very distinctive turn signal there. We then have even more pixels going on down here with the full LED headlights. It's kind of an accent light strip there, and then the main headlight module is a little bit lower. Then if you go in for an even closer look, it's a bit difficult to see on camera, but there are even little pixels underneath that clear plastic portion. We then have the radar sensor right there for the adaptive cruise control and safety systems, 360-degree camera right there, and at the bottom of the bumper we have the active aero shutters. Those are a key element to the design of this because this has an extraordinarily low coefficient of drag. Now as we move around to the side, you'll notice that we have a somewhat controversial design element that's really highlighted on this model. If you get the calligraphy trim, then you don't get this black portion on the wheel arch, but here we have a body-colored insert on top. Hyundai says that they wanted to give this more of a squared arch design to give it a bit more of a rugged appearance, but that aerodynamically that was a bit of a problem. It also increases wind noise, etc. So they went in this direction where they have that blacked out section there to give it that sort of appearance of a squared off arch, and then that body colored trim strip right on top. Let me know what you think about that. Now dimensionally this is just under 200 inches long. So interestingly, this is notably bigger than the Palisade. We have a huge wheelbase, well over 120 inches here, and that's what gives us the fantastic interior room. Not only is this longer than a Palisade, it's also taller and wider than a Palisade. Now as we come around to the back, you'll notice the really distinctive taillight setup here. We do have amber turn signals. That's a touch I really appreciate. You can see them blinking right over here on this side. But then we have this big LED bar that runs right across the top. And up here, these are the brake lights. So this entire bar across the top will illuminate when your brakes are on, except for this last little section right there on either side. We have a very, very vertical hatch in the rear. From some angles, this gives me maybe a Volvo station wagon vibe, which I think is actually a really good look for the Ioniq 9. And the general shape defies or belies some of the dimensions that we find here. You'll notice that we have a really raked windshield, and it starts practically right on top of the front tires there. And then we have a gentle arc to the roofline. It has its peak somewhere around here, right around the rear doors right there. And then we have a narrowing greenhouse towards the rear, giving it that solid haunch in the back. Let's go ahead and take a look at that back again here. See, we have the Ioniq 9 logo right there. These are actually embossed basically into the metal, and then there's that applique that fills that gap. We have the Hyundai logo in the glass right there. 360-degree camera right down there. If I can find the button for the hatch, it's actually right over there. You can see we have a really big cargo area, about 20 cubic feet of cargo capacity back here. This is significantly more than we find in the Tesla or the Rivian, or yes, even that Volvo, and very comparable to some of the larger three-row gasoline vehicles that you might want to be cross-shopping against this, like the Palisade or a Telluride, etc. You'll really notice that, especially if you fold down the third row seats, because these fold really flat into the floor. EVs are of course known for having a big flat floor, and that translates right into a lot of cargo and passenger carrying efficiency. The third row seats, we'll take a look at those in a bit. They seat only 2 back there, so there's no 8-passenger version of the Ioniq 9. That is something I would love to see, because it does appear that the rear seats are almost wide enough for that to happen. Now, one of the reasons that the rear seats are not quite as wide as you might think is because we actually have some pretty wide tires available. This model, again, is not the top end model. I'll show you that hopefully in a bit, but we have 275/50 R20s on this model, and the tires will go up to 285 millimeters wide if you get the top end model with the optional wheels. The black stripe that runs right across the bottom, that's pretty consistent among the different trims. So if you get the Calligraphy model where this panel is body colored, then that black stripe will still intersect it across there. While we're talking about cargo capacity, you'll find about 3 cubic feet of cargo capacity in the front if you get the rear-wheel drive model. Yep, rear-wheel drive by default. And then it drops down to about 1.5 cubic feet if you get the all-wheel drive model. This model is the all-wheel drive version, so we have that smaller cargo area there, but there's no separate pizza box lid like we find in some of the Ioniq vehicles. There is a little panel here so you can get to the cabin air filter there, and they'd say that this cargo compartment is rated for 45 pounds. There's also an electronic release for the front trunk now. So in addition to being able to pull a regular hood sort of handle, there's actually going to be a button over there on the inside. Before we get to the interior, let's talk about the big reason that you might want to wait for the Ioniq 9 over getting an EV9 right now. The main thing is the battery. It's bigger in the Ioniq 9. We get a 110 kilowatt hour battery, giving us over 300 miles of EPA range in every trim. You'll get up to 335 miles of combined range in the rear-wheel drive model with the 19-inch wheels. That would basically be the base version with the 215 horsepower motor on the rear axle. You can get your choice of 2 different front motors in the all-wheel drive trims, a 94 horsepower motor or another 215 horsepower motor, bringing you up to either 305 horsepower total or 422 horsepower total. I think the 303 horsepower model would actually be pretty decent, and that is going to be a little bit more efficient than the model with the 422 horsepower. We don't know all of the range specifications just yet, but we do know that every model is going to be getting that bigger battery pack. And that bigger battery pack is going to charge faster than the EV9's battery pack as well. They say that you'll be able to go from 10% to 80% in 24 minutes in every version of the Ioniq 9. The charging rates are definitely impressive on some of the competition, but the big deal here is that in just 24 minutes, you'll get 234 miles of additional range. And that's a big deal, especially compared against the Rivian and even that Tesla Model X. Now let's take a look at the inside. Again, keep in mind that this is not a fully loaded model, but this is really well equipped. Hopping inside, we have the big 2-screen infotainment system and instrument cluster that Hyundai has been known for a while. This is an early pre-production model, and unfortunately keeps turning itself off because it's on the power supply, exterior power supply. So it has that warning there that the vehicle is going to turn itself off. But it does offer the latest infotainment system from Hyundai and the latest design language from Hyundai as well. They have a little warning here that this is a early pre-production prototype, so things may not be quite right. But you could definitely see the inspiration from a lot of different vehicles in the Hyundai portfolio. Also with the color palette, we have kind of a khaki green, I guess you could say, interior, and then ivory or taupe for the midsection of the door panels. We get the same sort of plastic ridges here that we see in some of the other Ioniq models with the more linear and horizontal themes, and then the imitation wood on the dashboard with the ambient lighting there. I think that's a really elegant look. This is clearly not built with the same level of fancy materials that we find in the Volvo or the Rivian, but I think I like the style in here a little bit better than the style of the Volvo. The Volvo is a little bit too conservative in some areas, and some functions with that big central screen are just not quite as user-friendly as in here. And Hyundai said that while they do appreciate having some touchscreen controls, they said that their audience was really more interested, or their customers are really more interested in physical buttons. I really appreciate that they've given us physical controls for things like the temperature, because that's a frequently used feature. Down below we find USB ports, one that interfaces with the system for smartphone projection, 2 charge-only ports, and then a 12-volt power port. These are pretty deep storage areas here. They decided they didn't want to make the front flat with the firewall because that does look a little bit weird. This This gives you a little bit of leg separation between the driver and front passenger, but we still have a flat floor there if you do want to put some of those larger bags right up front, something along those lines. This model does not have the sliding center console that is going to be available in North America, but it does have one of the less expected features, I would say, which is a terrain mode selection. I'll show you those in a bit. You press this down to switch between drive mode and terrain mode, and we get auto, snow, mud, and even sand there. Two big cup holders there, Qi wireless charging mat with more pixels. This opens, yep, it does open, there we go, to show us a pretty deep storage well inside. It has Hyundai's sort of egg-shaped key right there with the Hyundai logo. My one concern with this key is that it does seem to scratch pretty easily, but you can of course use your phone as a key if you'd rather do that. And this little guy up here, that's a fingerprint sensor. There's also some additional storage space going on in the center console. It's a little bit difficult to show you on camera, but if you take that divider out, we have a cargo bin that's open all the way to the back of the vehicle. And then you'll get slightly different storage if you get the top end models with the movable center console. Now, moving over to the front seats, you can see we have this two-tone upholstery design language here. There are a bunch of different upholstery options, and if you get an Ioniq 9 outside of North America, you can also get wool upholstery. Rather than imitation leather, Hyundai actually believes, very much like Volvo actually, that leather is a sustainable alternative. Over here we find controls for the front seats, including the relaxation mode for the front seats, engaging that there. You can see that pixel design language continues to the front seats and that multi-way adjustable head restraint. We don't have a moonroof in this particular model, as you can see there, but we do have slide to the side sun visors for the driver and front passenger. Moving all the way over to this side, you'll notice that we have a few warnings here because, again, this vehicle has had its battery connected and disconnected an awful lot during the day-to-day. Basically, the same sort of full LCD instrument cluster we find in a number of other Hyundai products, and a steering wheel that is very, very similar to the one that we find in the Hyundai Santa Fe. We have regen paddles on the back, controls for the infotainment system, adaptive cruise control, etc. there, and then we have the column-mounted shifter, start-stop buttons right there, and then you rotate around for drive and reverse. Over here on this side, we find some buttons for the charge door, we find a front open button, a rear hatch open button, stability and traction control, etc. Let's take a look at that recharge door. This is an early pre-production prototype, so oddly enough, this does not have the port that we will find on the production version, which is the NACS or J3400 charge port. So yes, it will have the Tesla connector by default. Hyundai is actually going to be the first car company outside of Tesla to use that charge connector natively on their vehicles, because this is going to be built in the United States. And Hyundai has said not only is it going to be built in the US, but the battery is built in North America, and it contains no restricted materials from China or the other countries of concern. And that means this will get a full $7,500 tax credit. That's what they're targeting. And that is definitely different than what we find on the Rivian R1S or even the Tesla Model X. Because the Model X, by the time you've added the third row option, it's too expensive to qualify for the tax credit. And the R1S, its batteries aren't sourced from the right places. Now let's hop into the second row. Let's talk about headroom first. As you can see, I have maybe about 4.5 inches of headroom. This roofline is really high. I was actually quite shocked about that because in a lot of EVs, the roofline gets slammed down so far in order to help improve efficiency that it's a lot less roomy feeling. But we also get significant amounts of legroom. I'm still waiting on the complete spec deck from Hyundai on the Ioniq 9 for North America, but this appears to be the roomiest in this segment by an absolute mile. We're going to have about 10 inches more combined legroom than we find in a Rivian R1S. Check this out. The driver's seat's adjusted for me at 6 feet tall. I have about 12 inches of legroom left. And even if I move over to this side, let's go ahead and move this front seat all the way back in its tracks. That is as far back as it will go. You can see I still have quite a lot of legroom, and it's even more reclined than the passenger seat, or sorry, the driver's seat up front. So lots and lots of room back here. If you're looking for an EV that can very comfortably accommodate rear-facing child seats especially, this is one of the roomiest available. There is so much room back here. This particular model is the one that seats 7. So we have a bench seat in the middle. You can also get captain's chairs if you want. And I appreciate the fact that the shoulder belt comes out of the seat back itself. Now let's go ahead and check out the third row. I will say that these seats do not tilt and slide in a way that would let you leave a child seat anchored into place, but we still have a huge third row. The first thing I noticed is that we get a really big opening to get into the third row. The second thing I noticed is that the seat bottom cushion is definitely a little low to the ground. And of course, unless you slide the second row forward a little bit, there's not a lot of legroom. However, remember, I had about 12 inches of legroom going on up front, so I could very easily move this seat to maybe about 4 or 5 inches further forward, have a significant amount of legroom left, and sit very comfortably back here in the third row. And headroom, that is absolutely not a problem. I was really surprised by that, just given the sloping roofline, because it does drop down there towards the rear. They really wanted to give this sort of a nautical theme, sort of a boat tail kind of vibe. But as you can see, I have, I don't know, maybe about 2.5, 3 inches of headroom in the back. You could very easily put a family of 6 foot tall people or taller in here, absolutely no problem. And we get yet more latch anchors. This is another surprise. We get 4 latch anchors in here, 2 in the middle, 2 in the way back. So if you have a lot of kids in child seats and you're looking for an EV, this is a great option. We have a map light up there, USB-C charge ports all around, air vents in the ceiling, and a decent amount of cup holders. We get 1 on the left side here, this side, and then 2 over here on this side. Perhaps most surprising is that the USB-C ports in here can put out 100 watts. We do have a decent number of hard plastics back here, so that armrest right there around those dual cup holders, that's a hard plastic. We have some retention mechanisms for those rear seat backs, and we do have relatively small windows for the third row passengers. For someone my height, the windows feel nice and high, so view out should not be a problem, and it does get wider over here by the pillar, but if you're a little kid in the back, you might find it a bit claustrophobic because the glass line doesn't just drop, it also raises up as it goes to the rear. Here's a view from all the way in the back. I do actually appreciate the manual fold design of the third row because they're going to be a lot faster to fold and unfold than the powered ones. We also have a little bit of underfloor storage back here. It's not an extraordinary amount, but you would be able to put your charge cables, knickknacks, and adapters, things like that right back there. Over here on this side, we also have a 15 amp 120 volt inverter that's on board there, and some buttons to power fold the second row seats. So you manual fold the third row, then you power fold the second row, and you have access to a huge amount of storage space. According to Hyundai, you should get the same amount of cargo capacity behind the second row and behind the third row, so both of those rows folded, as in a Rivian R1S, and significantly more than you'll find in a Tesla Model X. As we see in other Hyundai models, we don't have a completely identical driver and front passenger seat. The driver's seat gets 4-way adjustable lumbar, inflatable bolsters. We of course have that relaxation mode right there where you get the ottoman while you're charging. And on this side, we have the same sort of ottoman arrangement, but we don't find the inflatable bolsters, just the 4-way lumbar support. I do appreciate the fact that we get the adjustable lumbar for the passenger, however. Now let's quickly check out the European spec Calligraphy trim. This is the top end model, and some of the things on this model are not coming to the US. So big disclaimer there, I'll point those out where I know, but check out those Calligraphy wheels. These are a really cool twist on the sort of turbine style wheels that we see in a lot of EVs with a really flat face. So if I come around to the side, you'll notice that we get these machined elements here, and it's all very, very vertical, but then we have the little fins on the inside. This is one of the most interesting wheels I think Hyundai has ever produced. We have the body-colored sections on the side of the vehicle there with the body-colored little eyebrows on top. And then, of course, we get the big feature that we're not going to get in the US, which is the side view camera feature. That's not allowed by FMVSS in North America. And that means that the interior is slightly different for the European market and a number of other world markets where we have that camera on the doors. If you think this is really cool, now's the time to reach out to the US government and complain, why can't we get the coolest tech in the US these days? This one has a different color interior, obviously. It's sort of a burgundy, maybe wine color, not quite brown, not quite plum either, with the taupe sections on the door panels, or ivory, whatever we want to call those. Brown sort of carpets there, matching things. I really like this two-tone interior. Let me know what you think about that, because we get another Volvo-like feature with this two-tone steering wheel. Brown button modules as well. That's a nice touch. I love the color combos going on in there. This one has the 2-seat second row as well. So this has the more relaxing second row seats. Let's go ahead and see how they move. That one still tilts forward, right like you'd expect. Coming around to the rear, you can see basically the same design that we find in the North American one. The exception, of course, being the European charge connector. That's the way you really know that this does not belong in North America. And then moving to the second row, let's check this seat out. This is one reason you might want to choose the 7-passenger version if you have kids in child seats, because we do not have that same style mechanism for the captain's chairs. I really love this color combo. Let me know what you think about this versus the green interior. In addition to upgraded upholstery, we also get the massaging functionality on the front seats that we see in some other Hyundai vehicles. We get different trim, of course, calligraphy located right there on that trim panel, different color palettes as well. Down here, we didn't take a look at this earlier. There's a little storage area. You can put your smartphone right there on that slot. And then we have a fairly large slot-style glove compartment below that. I suspect you would be able to fit an 11-inch tablet computer inside, because this area is actually quite a bit deeper than I had first expected. As I said at the beginning of the video, Hyundai has yet to announce pricing for the new Ioniq 9, but I expect it's going to start right around $60,000. Currently, the Kia EV9 with the big battery and rear-wheel drive starts just under $60,000 before destination, a little over $60,000 including destination. I suspect this is going to be right in the same neighborhood. Keep in mind, though, this does have a battery that's about 10% larger, and that's how this gets to over 300 miles of range in every trim. It also gets the faster charging because of that battery pack. And it's going to have the NACS connector native on the vehicle, if that's of interest to you. Adapters are going to be a way of life for quite some time, so you are going to have to use an adapter if you want to charge at a CCS station, which, at least for the moment, is going to be required to charge this battery as rapidly as it can. You will get a slightly derated charging window if you do go to a Tesla supercharging station. However, the ability to do that really adds a lot of practicality, especially for road trips, for something like this, where if you have the ability to go to a CCS station, obviously you can charge faster, but if you simply need a charge, those Tesla supercharger stations are a bit more available. Let me know what you think about the new Ioniq 9, and where do you suspect its top-end calligraphy trim is going to be priced? I would assume that it's going to easily go up to the $80,000 plus mark. I would expect it to be pretty direct competition to the base version of the Volvo EX90. And if you are cross-shopping this with the EX90, there's some things you should know. I think the technology in here is better baked than what we find in the EX90. We're going to get seat switches and seat controls and just general controls inside and outside that are a bit more normative. The EX90, it has just one knob on the seats, and I found that a little bit difficult to use. It also has a much more futuristic, space-like interior with a lot fewer buttons than we find in this. And I really love the approach of Hyundai with all those extra buttons. And of course, we get the ability to leave a child seat latch anchored into place in this second row seat here and still access the third row. That's a feature we don't find in the Volvo. Then, of course, the practical features. We get significantly more interior room, significantly more legroom, and more cargo room than we find in that Volvo EX90. Range, that's pretty similar. The Volvo does have nicer interior components. In here, we do find things like hard plastics lower on the doors. These mid-sections of the rear doors, those are all soft touch materials, but we do find harder plastics lower and harder plastics in the back of the vehicle. You also don't find real wood trim or anything like that in the Ioniq 9. That is obviously where the upcoming 3-row Genesis is going to step in if you want those luxury features. But this represents a really interesting value, I would say. Really interesting split between those other entries that are currently on sale in the US and some of the 3-row EVs that we may be seeing from more mainstream brands coming soon. Direct competition to this could also be seen as the upcoming Cadillac Vistiq. There's going to be a video on that on the channel if you haven't already seen it. So definitely there's some options available in 2025, but this is going to be one of the most affordable and certainly one of the most family focused. Be sure and sound off about that down there in the comment section below and let me know, are you interested? And especially, are the eyebrows over the wheel wells, are those good? Are they bad? Really want to know about that too. Thanks.